My name is Tessa. I'm 25 years old. I work as a paralegal, and I've always been the responsible one. I'm the one who saves, the one who plans, the one who doesn't have $150,000 in debt, which is why, when my parents called me over to their house for a serious talk, I felt that familiar pit in my stomach. The air in their living room was thick, heavy. It wasn't a talk, it was an ambush. They sat me down, my sister Zoe, 28, sitting right beside them. My mother, Barbara, broke the silence. Your sister has significant debts. A $150,000 problem. Then, my mother looked at me. We're family, Tessa, and we need to help each other out. They didn't want family help. They wanted my inheritance. The $200,000 my grandparents had specifically, legally, left to me. My blood ran cold. The audacity of it. The years of me saving, of me being punished for C grades while she got tutors, all led to this. They wanted me to erase her mistakes. I looked all three of them in the eye, and I said, no. The shock in that room could have cut glass. That single word, no, was a declaration of war. It was the moment I realized this no would cost me my family. But it was the only thing that could save my life. Have you ever been the only one in the room willing to enforce a boundary? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for the whole story. That no didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't a moment of sudden defiance. It was a lifetime in the making. It was the result of 25 years of being cast in a role I never auditioned for. To understand why I said no, to understand what happened in that living room, you have to understand the setup. My entire life, I was the scapegoat. And my sister, Zoe, she was the golden child. It wasn't a secret, it wasn't subtle, it was policy. It was a set of rules written in invisible ink that everyone in the house could read but me. Or maybe, I was the only one who had to read them. Let me take you back. High school, about 8 years ago. Zoe, a junior, comes home with a C in algebra. She tosses her report card on the kitchen counter, sighs, and says she's just not a math person. My mother, Barbara, rushes over. She has this look on her face, this deep, profound concern. She's worried about Zoe's stress levels. My father nods grimly, asking, what does she need? What she needed, apparently, was a private tutor. A tutor was hired. He came over every Tuesday and Thursday. They would sit at the kitchen table, drinking tea. My mother would bake cookies for them. It was all very calm, very supportive. Zoe's C was a problem the family needed to solve. It was an obstacle they had to help her overcome. That same semester, I was a freshman. I got a C in history. A C is a C, right? It's the same letter of the alphabet. So why was her C a tragedy, and my C a crime? There was no tea for me. There was no discussion about my stress levels. There was just shouting. Lazy, my father said, his voice bouncing off the walls. You are just not applying yourself, Tessa. My mother stood there, arms crossed, her face tight with disappointment. Not worry, disappointment. I was grounded for a month. My cheap, pay-as-you-go phone was confiscated. I was banned from seeing my friends. I was ordered to spend every night at that same kitchen table, not with a kind tutor, but alone, with my textbook, ordered to fix myself. I sat in my room. No phone, no friends, just staring at the peeling paint on my wall, and I tried to understand. How? How could the same grade, in the same house, from the same parents, get two completely different results? It took me a while, but I finally got it. I learned the lesson. Zoe's failure was an external problem. It was an injustice done to her by a mean teacher or a hard subject. It was a problem my parents needed to solve for her. My failure? My C? That was an internal flaw. It was a defect in my character. It was proof that I was lazy, that I was ungrateful, that I wasn't trying hard enough. Zoe was being trained to receive. I was being trained to provide. This pattern wasn't an exception. It was the blueprint for our entire childhood. If Zoe was stressed, she needed a break. If I was stressed, I needed to work harder. If Zoe needed help, she got a handout. If I needed help, I got a lecture on responsibility. That blueprint? It's the exact reason they were all sitting on that sofa, looking at me, expecting me to hand over $150,000. They didn't just think it was my job to fix this. They had been training me for it my entire life. That lesson in the kitchen, her failure is a problem, my failure is a flaw, it's scaled up, fast. Fast forward 2 years. The car incident. Zoe turns 16, gets her license. My parents, all smiles, take her car shopping. Which really just meant they went to a dealership, picked out a 3-year-old certified pre-owned sedan, and bought it. They parked it in the driveway. My father tossed her the keys at dinner. A gift, just like that. She hadn't worked a day in her life. She had no job, no savings. She just received it. Then, it was my turn. 6 months later, I pass my test. I'm excited, thinking, okay, maybe this is when it's equal. Maybe I get the really old family car. I get a lecture. A job builds character. Tessa, my father said, not even looking up from his newspaper. And you need to learn the value of $1. I needed to learn the value of $1? So, that summer, I got a job. 2, in fact. I spent my days in the musty, air-conditioned silence of the town library, re-shelving books, and I spent my nights at a 24-hour diner. That diner, that's what I remember. The smell of old coffee and industrial bleach, the constant sizzle from the flat-top grill. My arms had tiny burns from the fryer baskets. My feet, crammed into cheap non-slip shoes, would ache so badly by 2 a.m. that I'd limp to the bus stop. I was 16, working double shifts, saving every single dollar. I'd get my paycheck, cash it, and put the money into a savings account, watching the balance tick up, $5, $20 at a time. All while Zoe was driving her car, gifted by our parents, to the mall with her friends. After months, I finally did it. I saved enough. I bought my own car, a 10-year-old sedan. The paint was peeling on the hood, and the engine made a rattling sound that never quite went away. But it was mine. And you know what my parents said? They praised my independence. They told their friends, "Oh, Tessa is just so responsible. She bought her own car, you know." They didn't see the inequality. They created it. They manufactured it. They praised me for surviving a problem they had intentionally inflicted. It wasn't independence. It was a test. And the reward for passing was just another test. The biggest one? College. Zoe went away to a 4-year university. My parents paid for her entire degree. Tuition, dorms, books, all of it. A degree, by the way, that she doesn't even use. She decided she was an artist and piled up unsold canvases in her apartment. Me? I worked. I took loans. I went to a community college and then transferred to a state school, all while working 30 hours a week as a paralegal intern. But here is the single most important detail, the one thing that explains everything. While Zoe was at her expensive school, she took out $100,000 in student loans on top of what my parents were paying. And my parents co-signed them. They tied their financial future to an anchor and handed the chain to my sister. I didn't know it at the time. I was too busy working, too busy paying my own rent, too busy building the responsible life they demanded of me. I had no idea that with every stroke of that pen, they were building the bomb that would one day land on my doorstep. They weren't just funding her future, they were setting the stage to steal mine. After college, the safety net didn't just stay, it expanded. Zoe decided she wanted to move to a trendy part of the city to pursue her art. She found a loft-style apartment, the kind with exposed brick and stainless steel appliances, the kind I only saw on TV. She didn't have a job. She had no savings. She had that useless degree and $100,000 in co-signed loans. It didn't matter. My parents paid her security deposit. Then, they paid her entire first year of rent, just paid it. A blank check, so she could get on her feet and focus on her creative process. I was living in a tiny studio apartment with a galley kitchen, listening to my upstairs neighbors fight every night. I was paying for it by working 40 hours a week as a paralegal. I was getting on my feet by, standing on them. The final insult? The wedding. Zoe, already drowning in debt she wasn't paying, meets a guy. They get engaged. And my parents, They throw her a lavish $30,000 wedding. $30,000. I saw the pictures, the lace dress, the 10-tier cake, the open bar. All while she had $100,000 in student loans, and now, apparently, another $20,000 in credit card debt. My parents just bankrolled the party, smiling for the cameras. The math didn't add up. How? How could they keep throwing good money after bad? And all this time, I'm just working, paying my bills, paying my own student loans, which were tiny compared to hers. I'm putting 10% of every paycheck, no matter how small, into a savings account. I was the responsible one, so my reward was just getting to be responsible. I was the reliable one, so I was relied upon to take care of myself. And then, everything changed. My maternal grandparents passed away, both of them, within 6 months of each other. It was devastating. They were my rocks. My grandmother taught me how to budget. My grandfather always asked about my paralegal work, really listened, and told me he was proud of my grit. They saw me. A few weeks after the second funeral, we were in a stuffy, wood-paneled office for the reading of the will. The air was still and heavy, smelling like old paper. My parents were there. Zoe was there, checking her phone. The lawyer, a man with thin glasses, read through the usual legal language, and then he got to the main bequest. He cleared his throat. And the remainder of the estate, valued at $200,000, is to be left solely and directly to my granddaughter, Tessa. I stopped breathing. My mother's head snapped toward me. Zoe looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. Arshawen Mayuan. Specifically me, the will document said it. My name. Not my grandchildren, not my daughters, me. In that moment, sitting on that hard leather chair, I felt a shock go through me. This wasn't just cash. It was validation. It was the first time in my entire life someone had looked at the two of us, Zoe and me, and chosen me. It was safety. It was a down payment on a house. It was a future. It was my grandparents' final act of protection. It was them reaching out from beyond the grave to say, "We see you, Tessa. We see your grit." I felt safe. For the first time. I didn't know, in that moment, that my family was looking at that same $200,000. And they didn't see my future. They saw a solution to their problem. My no in that living room was just the first shot. It was the grenade pin. The real explosion happened over the next 24 hours. After I said it, the room went dead silent. My mother, Barbara, just stared at me, her face pale with a kind of shock I'd never seen before. Zoe, for the first time, looked like she might actually be sick. My father just said, "Get out." So I did. I went home to my small apartment, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the lock. I sat on my sofa in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew it wasn't over. I was right. The real war began the next day. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a campaign. A campaign of harassment, designed to break me down. My phone, the one I'd paid for every month since I was 16, became a torture device. It started buzzing on my nightstand at 7 a.m., and it didn't stop. Buzz. A text. Buzz. Another. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A missed call. A voicemail. More texts. It was a constant, digital stream of guilt, aimed directly at my conscience. I looked at the screen, my stomach churning. The first one I opened was from my mother. "You are tearing the family apart." My fingers went cold. I'm tearing it apart? I thought about that. Was I tearing it apart, or was I just the first person to finally say no? Was I the one holding the bomb, or was I just the one who refused to keep holding it for them? The family was fine as long as I knew my place. The family was fine as long as I was the silent, responsible pack mule. The second I refused to carry their burden, I was the problem. Another buzz. My father. "Your sister is struggling, and you're just hoarding that money. After all we did for you." Hoarding. That's what they called it. Not saving, not planning, not honoring my grandparents' gift. Hoarding. Like I was a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, being selfish. And that line. "After all we did for you." My mind flashed. The diner, the bleach, the rattling engine of my 10-year-old car, the late nights studying after a full shift. What, exactly, did they do for me? They taught me to be self-sufficient. I saw that now, but they didn't do it so I could be strong. They did it so I wouldn't be a burden. Until they needed me to carry their burdens. All that training and responsibility was just to groom me to be their financial fall guy. Then, the phone didn't buzz. It rang. I looked down. It was Zoe. My finger hovered over the decline button, but I knew I had to face it. I answered. I expected yelling. I expected insults. What I got was worse. Weeping. Hysterical, gasping sobs. The full-blown victim. "Tessa," she cried, her voice thick. "How could you be so cruel?" I stood there, speechless. Me? Cruel? And then she said it. The line that burned itself into my memory. "It's not fair," she wailed. "You get $200,000 for doing nothing. You get to just have it. And I'm over here struggling. It's not fair." Heat. Pure, white-hot heat climbed up my spine. My jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. Doing nothing. She said I got it for doing nothing. My entire life. I had done everything. I worked. I saved. I got the C and was punished, while she got the C and was coddled. I bought my car. I paid my rent. I paid my loans. My doing nothing was a 5-year-long marathon of responsibility. Her struggling was a 8-year-long sprint of entitlement, funded by our parents, culminating in a $30,000 party she couldn't afford. And in that moment, hearing her sob, I realized the truth. She wasn't just acting, she believed it. She genuinely, truly believed that she was the victim, that she was entitled, not just to her own life, but to mine. That's when the fear turned into ice. I hung up on Zoe's sobs. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was rage. The sheer, blinding entitlement of that call. It's not fair. She was right. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that I worked double shifts while she got a free car. It wasn't fair that I was punished for a C grade while she was coddled. And it damn sure wasn't fair that my grandparents saw all of it, and in their final act, they trusted me, and now she thought she was entitled to that too. After that call, the harassment got worse, but the tone changed. It wasn't just guilt-tripping anymore. It felt desperate, panicked. The texts from my parents, especially my father, weren't just "you owe us." They were frantic. "You're putting this whole family at risk. The consequences will be catastrophic, Tessa." Why were they this panicked? It's Zoe's debt. Yes, it's bad, but bankruptcy exists. Why was this a family catastrophe? And then, as I stood in my kitchen, my phone buzzing on the counter like a trapped wasp, it clicked. It was a memory, so small I'd almost forgotten it. My father, at that same kitchen table years ago, sighing over a stack of papers. Zoe's university acceptance. My father grumbling, "I shouldn't be co-signing these." Co-signing. The $100,000 in student loans. My blood turned to ice. I went straight to my laptop, my paralegal brain taking over. I looked up co-signer liability. The words on the screen were stark. A co-signer is just as legally 100% responsible for the debt as the primary borrower. If Zoe defaults, they are legally on the hook. This isn't about saving Zoe. This is about saving themselves. This whole thing, the ambush, the guilt, "you're tearing us apart," it wasn't about sisterly duty. It was about their credit, their assets, their retirement. They weren't asking me to be a sister. They were asking me to be their bailout. They were willing to sacrifice my future, the one my grandparents gifted me, to fix a mistake they made when they signed that paper. They enabled her for 28 years, and now that the bill was finally due, they were trying to hand it to me. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me. The rage was gone. Now, it was just clear. The phone rang again. I looked at the screen. "My mother, Barbara," I answered. I didn't say hello. Her voice wasn't emotional. It wasn't sad. It was cold. Steel. This was the final escalation. "Tessa," she said, her tone flat. "Your father and I have given you a chance to do the right thing. You've refused." I waited. If you won't be a good daughter, she said, then everyone will know it. We will tell everyone, our family, our friends, everyone at our church. My stomach dropped. The church, the community I grew up in. They will all know, she continued, her voice biting, how selfish you are, how ungrateful, how you're hoarding your money while your sister and your parents are suffering. We'll see how you like it then. It was a threat. To my reputation, to my entire life. They were going to paint me as a monster, use the full power of community shaming to either get the money or get their revenge. I stood there, looking at my reflection in the dark window of my apartment. I saw the 6-year-old in the diner uniform, her feet aching. I saw the girl at the kitchen table, grounded. My voice shook, but I said it. Every word was a stone. That money was left to me. It is mine. And I am not paying for Zoe's mistakes. And I am not paying for yours. I pressed the red button. I hung up, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. The church threat was the end. That's the moment the last bit of attachment, the last shred of hope for family, just burned away. They weren't just entitled. They weren't just desperate. They were malicious. They were threatening to destroy my reputation, my social standing, my entire life. All to save their own credit score. The next morning, I didn't go to my paralegal job. I took a personal day. I walked into a law office downtown. The name on the door was Mr. Kane. The room was silent, formal. The air smelled like old books and floor wax. There was a thick, plush carpet that muffled my footsteps. After the constant, buzzing harassment, the quiet in that room felt like a physical shield. It was the safest I had felt in weeks. I sat across from Mr. Kane, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a very serious suit. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. As a paralegal, I knew what he needed. I laid it out like a case file. Here, I said, sliding a copy of my grandparents' will across the desk. I pointed to the clause. Sole bequest, $200,000. Here, I said, pulling out my phone. I had screenshots of everything. Are the harassing texts, the demands, the threats. I showed him the one from my mother. You are tearing the family apart. The one from my father. You're just hoarding that money. The one from Zoe. It's not fair. You did nothing. And finally, the voicemail log of the call from my mother, where she threatened to go to our church. Then, I laid out the final piece. And here is the motive. My parents co-signed $100,000 of my sister's student loans. They are legally liable. This is a $150,000 demand, but their real panic is their own liability. Mr. Kane didn't blink. He steepled his fingers, looked at the will, then at the texts, and then back at me. He nodded slowly. Miss Tessa, he said, his voice calm and steady. Your grandparents' bequest is legally and morally yours. You are under zero obligation to pay a cent of your sister's debt. They, however, he said, tapping the student loan information I'd provided, are 100% liable for those co-signed loans. He leaned forward. They are asking you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You do not have to do that. I sat there, the quiet of the office sinking into my bones. This is it. This is the door. I can walk back out of this office and back into that fire. I can keep answering their calls, keep defending myself, keep living in the buzz of their crisis. Or, I can close this door. They were willing to burn me. To save themselves, they were willing to take my future, my grandparents' final gift, and toss it into the furnace of their own mistakes. What choice was there, really? They were willing to destroy my reputation at church to get my money. Was I willing to lose my money to save my relationship with them? A relationship? What relationship? The choice was easy. It was done. What are my options? I asked. The strongest, he said, is an irrevocable trust. We move the inheritance. It becomes legally untouchable. By them, and, for a time, even by you. It will be completely safe. I picked up the pen. Draw it up. I signed the documents. I signed away the liquid cash, and in return, I bought my freedom. We transferred the entire $200,000 inheritance. It was done in an hour. It was safe. I walked out of that building, the bright sunlight hitting my face. I felt Lighter. I pulled out my phone. The group chat Barbara, Dad, Zoe was buzzing. I opened it. I typed one final message. One boundary. Clean, cold, and absolute. The inheritance is now in a secure, irrevocable trust and is legally inaccessible. This was my grandparents' gift to me, and I will not be using it to pay your debts. Do not contact me again. Then, I did what I should have done days ago. Barbara, block. Dad, block. Zoe, block. Done. The silence was immediate. My phone, which had been a weapon of war for days, a constant source of buzzing, vibrating anxiety, just went quiet. Total no contact. It was a silence so loud, it was almost deafening. For the first few days, I'd pick it up, expecting to see a new barrage of insults, a new number they were using to break through. Nothing. Just peace. I had cut the cord, and in doing so, I didn't just sever a relationship. I transferred the burden. The $150,000 problem they had tried to make mine was now, finally, theirs. The consequences are theirs to own. My parents, Barbara and my father, are now legally on the hook for the $100,000 student loan they co-signed. That is a binding legal contract. Their credit, their assets, their retirement, it's all on the line. They wanted to sacrifice my future to protect their own, and now they have to face the consequences of their own signature. That is their problem. And Zoe, my golden child sister, she, with her $30,000 wedding and her art career, is now facing the full $150,000. The $100K in student loans, which my parents are also on the hook for, the $20,000 in credit card debt, the wedding bills, it's all hers. There is no bailout coming, not from me, and not from our parents, who are now scrambling to save themselves from the very debt they helped her rack up. She'll have to do something she's never done in her 28 years of life. She'll have to get a real job. Or she'll have to file for bankruptcy. That is her problem. For a week, I lived in that strange, quiet void. I went to work. I paid my bills. I came home. I half expected a knock on the door, a confrontation in the parking lot. Nothing. Then, Saturday morning came. I woke up without an alarm. The sun was streaming through the blinds of my apartment, casting long, dusty stripes on the floor. I got up. I went to my little kitchen. I ground coffee beans, the rich, oily smell filling the air. I boiled the water, poured it, and waited. I stood there, leaning against the counter, just holding a warm mug. My phone was on the counter next to me. It was silent. It wasn't buzzing. There was no red notification bubble. And I realized I could breathe. My shoulders, which had been up around my ears for what felt like a decade, finally dropped. The air in my lungs didn't feel charged. It didn't feel like I was waiting for the next attack. It was just air. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the responsible one. I wasn't the family bailout. I was just Tessa, in my apartment, drinking coffee. And I was safe. The truth is, I did lose my family. I lost the people who were supposed to be my family. But I learned that support doesn't have to come from blood. I found it in the calm, professional validation of my lawyer, Mr. Kiney, who looked at the facts and told me I was not obligated to set myself on fire. I found it in the anonymous validation of strangers online who read my story and, by the hundreds, said, "You are not the bad guy. Your grandparents were protecting you. We support you." That's a found family. It's the one you find when the one you were born into fails. It's the people who offer support not as a transaction, not as a debt to be collected later, but unconditionally. And I am honoring my grandparents. I'm taking that $200,000, that final act of love and grit, and I'm using it for my future. I'm meeting with a mortgage broker next week. I'm going to buy a small condo, a place that is mine, security, a home. Everything they always wanted me to have. In the end, my parents and my sister didn't just lose $150,000. They lost a daughter, they lost a sister, and they lost her because they saw her as a bank instead of a person. I learned that family is not a blank check you are obligated to cash. It's not a one-sided contract where you give and they take. It's a bond. It has to be earned. It has to be mutual. And if it's not, you have every right to walk away. You have every right to choose yourself, to protect your future, and to build a life and a family that is truly your own. If you've ever had to choose yourself over a toxic bond, you are not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Subscribe for more stories of breaking free.